What do you feel like your inside depth is, and how do you start to look for, I guess, 4, 5, and 6? How many do you think you can go deep there?
I still think, we're a work in progress trying to identify, who those guys are, who's truly 4, who's 5, and possibly 6. We feel really good about 1, 2, 3, and we felt 4 was really coming on, 4A, 4B. Now, we just got to keep moving the needle. It's just day 6. So, it's a process. It's a process. There's been some good stuff put on film, some good things to teach off of, areas that they see, things they need to do to improve, to try to move the needle in the right direction. So, I'm encouraged about the attitude and the mindset that they're bringing, but we've got to continue to push the envelope the right way.
Rodney, when you look at Tyree Weathersby, he was the one I know you had high hopes for before he got injured with the hip 2 years ago. Where do you kind of put him in as far as like his comeback, and then kind of where's he at mentally and physically right now?
Weathersby, I think has had a really good camp thus far. I think he picked up where he left off in the spring. He's a kid that had a really good spring. He's a kid that has a tremendous skill set, and he's done a really good job of picking up the system. He has minimum bust. He plays hard. He has the right prototype body type that you're looking for. So, we're excited about him as far as where he's been these first 6 days, counting on him to continue to climb and move that needle in the right direction. And I can see that kid playing a significant role on this team this year.
Coach, you talked about feeling good about your top 3. What has David Hobbs done to sort of, as he's played a little bit more of his first 2 seasons, what has he done to kind of get in that sort of spot where you feel good about him?
Well, Hobbs he's a long, athletic kid that can bend and can really run and burst. The things that you really you wish for Hobbs, he's been stunted from a power explosiveness with 2 off seasons because of shoulder surgeries. You sit there and you always wondering what if, what would he be had he had those 2 off seasons? What would he be right now? But he's a very talented guy. We need for him to take that next step. And so far in camp, he's done a really good job. Obviously he's a lot like some longer kids I've had, like Seymour and Stroud. He's a tall kid, so he has to really be conscientious, making sure that he's playing with great pad level, especially as an interior guy. So like I was telling him, we was watching film last night. If you think you're low, get lower. You ain't gonna ever be low enough. Just consistently playing behind his pads and playing with great fundamentals.
Who's been the most competitive in the D-line room this fall camp?
The whole room is competitive because they all want to play. That's how we built the culture of that room. It's about guys that come out every day, put the work in, that show that they're trustworthy, and that they can play at a championship level. So that thing is always on display. There's nobody that has birthrights, So every day they have to go out and earn it. And it's like I say, this game, it parallels to life. In life, you got to go earn it every day. There's nothing given to you. So, it is a competitive room. I think even for young guys, everybody come in, that's the culture that we want, that you have to put that work in. When you step between those lines, your reputation is on the line every day. It doesn't matter. There's no off days. Your reputation is on the line every time you step between them.
Coach, Don Bailey is a guy that seems to have quietly just kind of gotten better and better every year a little bit. Can you talk about his progression and just what it says about that culture that you talk about in the room?
I'll tell you, just talking to those scouts, I think right now if we had to vote, MVP of the front guys, I think Don Bailey would win it hand down. This kid has had a, outstanding camp, run, pass, leadership, all those things. He really stands out in a very positive way, and obviously, I think a lot of people know when I first got here, he stood out another way, and it wasn't a good way. This kid has really earned everything that he's a blue collar, worked his tail off to get himself in this position, and he's made himself a really good SEC D lineman. And I am really glad that we have him. I love his leadership. I love the way he goes about his business, his work ethic. He's trying to, him along with Moy, they're really trying to lead that room and be pace setters for that. And even Eason has gotten better, and they're trying to get him to even up his to their level. But, I'm excited about Dom.
Over here, Coach. I know Jamal Wallace didn't have a long track record as a defensive lineman before he got here, and he missed some time earlier this year. How's he come along this offseason, and what have you seen from him so far in camp?
Well, Jamal is a talented, big man. He just didn't have any sweat equity as a D lineman, and then just getting hurt and not being able to put the work in to work on the nuances of being a defensive lineman and not just being a defensive lineman, being an interior defensive lineman. You're taking a kid that was a safety, outside backer dropping, that when he got here, he didn't even know how to get in a three-point stance. So, he needs every single day of work that he can get because he is big, he is explosive, he can run, he is twitchy. He has the traits of a D lineman, the SEC D lineman. But now just putting together the mechanical, technical things that he needs to do to take that game. But I'm excited. He's been able to be out there so far and stay healthy. That's the biggest thing. Be able to stay healthy, put in that work, and continue to grow.
When you get a talented freshman D lineman who was a dominant player in high school, what's the hardest thing to coach into a freshman or coach out of a freshman?
Well, I think, the transition, from high school to college, is always going to come down to the tempo of practice. And then, the level of competition. They're playing against 200-pound offensive linemen in high school. Those guys don't exist. You know what I'm saying? So, just the level of competition, the strain that's involved, it's just like we were talking yesterday. They can never become great and stay comfortable. So they got to get themselves comfortable being uncomfortable right now so they can be comfortable later. So those are the things that I am trying to put into them, put them in difficult situations, so strain them so that good stuff can come out, because that's when the good stuff come out, when you put them in pressure situations. But I'm really excited about the three young guys. They're all three of them are long, they're athletic. I think they have a really good skill set. And I could see those guys, having a role and being able to contribute in a positive way.
Since you've been here, is this as deep and as diverse as you've been at the strong side defensive end position? When you talk about Dom, you talk about Tyree's game, Tyree Weathersby's game, West's game. Is this as competitive and as diverse as you've been there?
Yeah, I think it's and competition is good. It's the best thing you can have. It really is. It doesn't allow for a guy to get comfortable. A guy can't rest on his laurels. It's just like even just out there, we just got through running. One of them don't want to run. Hey, it's all right. I'm gonna play next guy. I don't really care. That's just the way it is. We're gonna do it one way, and that's the right way. All right, you got. It's because everybody's hurting. My toe hurt, my hip hurt, everybody got something hurt. You got to figure out a way to fight through it. And that's the thing that you're trying to build. in that room. And I just think, the guys know that's what we're built on. That's the consistency of it, But, that has allowed us to build depth, and to be able to play multiple guys. And so we're still, we're working on that to identify who are our top 10 guys, what I'm saying? Who's 11, who's 12, all that, just guys that we can count on to be able to go out there and play with a championship level. All right, thank you guys. Have a good evening.